welcome back to another segment of the LPE Author Chat Series. I am your host, Kimberly K. LaBoo, CEO and founder of LaBoo Publishing Enterprise. And welcome back to another segment of the LPE Author Chat Series. This week, we are interviewing authors from our soon-to-be-released anthology, The Mom and Me, Volume 2, stories and practical advice from moms who have survived parenting. And so many of you have Volume 1, right? And know how incredible this volume was. And we became Amazon #1 bestsellers. Well, guess what? The Moms in Volume 2 did not disappoint. So you guys you're going to want to get Volume 2 as well. And so with that said, we have another amazing author that's joining us this evening to talk about her amazing chapter in the book, You're Not My Mom, by Tamika Decatur. So welcome to the broadcast, Tamika.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. Yours is another phenomenal written chapter. Right? I know I'm saying that about them all, but you guys just such a good job with all of this. And so first, tell me, why did you decide to be a part of the Mom and Me Volume 2?
So I think my decision was based more on obedience than of actual desire, I should say.
Oh, wow.
One thing that really motivates me is to attempt to be obedient to God in everything that I do. And obviously I miss the ball and fall short so many times, but honestly, it was very evident to me, based on some of the challenges that I've been experiencing in this role of a stepmom over the past few years, that God showing himself in our lives and in my relationships with my stepchildren was not something that was to be kept to myself, but it was something that I went through and am going through to be able to share with others. So
yeah,
that's the reasoning behind my chapter.
Yeah. I often say, things that we go through in life, they are not for us. They're for somebody else. So
That's right. That's right. That's right. And while I enjoy all of my children, and it was an absolute pleasure to write about them, while I enjoy that so much, I can't say that it would have been something that I raised my hand and said, oh yeah, I would love to do that.
Oh, wow. Well, I am so glad you did. And it's funny, it's like when I was reading the beginning of your chapter, and I'm going to share that in a second, when I was reading it, it's like I felt it.
Wow.
Oh. So you opened your chapter by saying, there are several things that have the ability to crush you if you aren't aware of the astonishing mystery and God's ability to transform broken things into beauty. For me, it was 4 words out of the mouth of a 10-year-old boy. These 4 words struck me like an electrical bolt right after a day of family fun, laughter, and what I considered pure bliss. You're not my mom, little Antoine sarcastically uttered while turning his back to me and walking away. While I never expected him to call me mom, I also never expected those words to cut me so deeply. So talk about what that moment was like for you in real time.
Well, it was a shock, because like I said, we'd had what I thought and what the kids and my husband thought was a phenomenal day.
Right.
We'd been out cutting up, eating, playing around, having a good time. And we were getting back home to settle in for the night and, have some dinner and wind down. And I think I'd given some direction to little Antoine that it was time to go and clean up and shower and get ready for dinner. And he was still very much in fun mode and was not
Yeah.
ready to wind down. And so he kind of gave me this look as if to say, like, who is she talking to? And so I repeated myself again. I'm like, it's time to wind down. We're going to prepare for dinner. And he looked at me with eyes as big as golf balls and said, "You're not my mom." And he said, "You can't tell me what to do." And at this
Wow.
point, I thought that it wasn't like in the very beginning of our relationship. So I thought that we had gotten to a place of mutual respect and mutual understanding. And so it was a surprise to hear him say that and just, blurted out. And then he turned around and stormed off and walked away. And I said,
Wow.
"Oh, okay. Well, your daddy will put you in the shower then, because either way, you need to shower and get ready for dinner."
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that just being a shocker. Like, especially if that hadn't been the tone, for a while, and just had it come out of the blue. So when you
Yeah,
said
I
it, I
was
just
like, this boy is crazy. Yeah. Yeah,
it sounds like
it
your
wasn't
response.
funny in the moment, but it's funny when I
Yeah,
think back about it now.
yeah. It sounds like your response was still one of like calm though. Like,
Yes,
I'm not gonna
it
beat him up.
was. It was because
Oh my
he was just
gosh.
10 and he was being a kid, and yeah,
Yeah,
so
I know
it was
step
funny.
parenting. Wow, hats off to you. He said, prior to meeting my husband, I'd been a single mom of one for 3 years. I'd worked tenaciously to develop fruitful parenting skills and had a pretty good understanding of what worked with my son Caleb and what didn't. You might say that I'd found my parenting style, as silly as I now realize that sounds. What I didn't yet know was that this parenting style was not a cookie cutter recipe for my future stepchildren. I quickly learned that I would need to work tenaciously to now develop additional parenting styles, and that was a challenge to say the least. So, talk about some of those challenges that you faced in trying to develop these additional parenting styles that you had to come up with now.
So let's see, where do I start with that one? First of all, realizing that not all children are the same.
Right.
It sounds like something obvious that you would think would be pretty much common sense, but
Hmm.
it's not until you've raised a child, until you've raised multiple children,
Yeah.
to understand that, you know, what parenting technique that might work with my youngest is not going to
Mhm.
work with my oldest. What works with my girls is not going to work with my boys. And
Yeah.
so just really taking the time to um, assess each child's strengths and weaknesses and their learning styles and communication preferences. And the list goes on and on
On and
and
on.
on. And so, what we like to say about, I'll give an example between Caleb, who is my youngest, 11, and Antoine, who's now 17.
Wow.
Caleb is the type of learner that you tell Caleb, "Hey, Caleb, this is hot. Don't touch this. If you touch it, you're going to get burned." You tell Caleb that, he will ask you a million and one questions to validate whether or not what you're saying is fact.
Wow.
And he will do investigation, and he will need to feel content with the responses you've provided before he will determine that he's not going to touch it. But once he comes to that conclusion, he's validated it, he's going to believe you, and he's not going to touch the stove because it's hot. Antoine, on the other hand, is a child that learns completely by experience. You can tell
No.
Antoine over and over and over again not to touch something because it's hot. You can give very valid reasons, you can show examples, but he is the type of child that learns through experience. and neither one of them are better than the other. Like neither one of the learning styles or learning preferences are better than the other. But had we known that Antoine was a toucher to learn, then we might have utilized some different exercises to teach him that before the example given of him touching a hot stove. So that's an example that we like to give about the learning differences and the learning preferences between our children. And that's something that I had to discover. I had to discover that, okay, you know, I'll have to give Antoine more opportunities to have hands-on learning, you know, whereas though I'll have to give Caleb more opportunities to have debates and discussions. So
wow. Yeah, learning curves for sure.
yeah.
So you talked about, you said the union of my husband Antoine and me created a blended family of 8. When I read that, I was like, what? I was like, okay, okay. You said, and then in addition to becoming a stepmom, I also became a Mimi, so a grandmother. You said our blended family dynamic was quite complex. I honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I didn't have much knowledge about what it looked like to fulfill my new roles. I really didn't have a healthy example of parenting in general, and this kind of stuff is not exactly taught in premarital counseling, although it should be. I thought that was funny. I'm like, no, they don't teach that in premarital counseling. And so I just thought that was really funny. So you want to talk a little bit about, gosh, 8 and a Mimi? Like,
yes, well, the 8 is inclusive of the grandkids. So my husband and I have in total 4 children. And then so we have Kiosha, Antoine, Shekinah, and Caleb. And then Kiosha has kids of her own.
Okay.
And so that
wow
is a total of, I think, about 8 now. Child, I can't even keep count now with all the kids. But yeah, nice size little lot.
Yeah, really. So let's see. You said, now listen, if I had known that those challenges would include lots of conflicts with my stepchildren's mothers, dramatic acts of rebellion from the children, and heavy tension within my own marriage, I'm not sure I would have jumped that broom. My testimony today is strong, though. If God called you to it, he will bring you through it. Like, how important was your faith in this journey?
Oh my God. It is the rock on which I stood and still stand. Yeah, I know very clearly that my role of being a mom and stepmom is ordained by God. And so in anything that God has called us to, there's a certain element of faith and belief that you have to know that he will also equip you and keep you and cover you. And so that has been my testimony over and over and over again, that you know, submitting everything in prayer to God and growing through the challenges, through the hurt, through the tears, through the sleepless nights, through forgiving myself for making mistakes. You know, that faith played a major part and still does in my relationship with my children.
I would imagine. You talked about it when you were talking about the tears and the hurt and all of that. You said, I remember times when I would lock myself in the bathroom and just cry. There were times that I'd take my pillow into my closet for the sole purpose of screaming into it. However, with every tear and each test, God was purifying me and building the resilience necessary to fulfill my purpose. I thought that was really beautifully written. And so kudos to you. I think, and you know, I think we all have those moments where those breakdown moments, you know, I think every mom has it every now and again, because really there's no real blueprint for this thing called parenting. And so we figure it out as we go along with the help of the Lord.
Yes, with the help of the Lord and a community and family and a village and the church and you name it.
Yes, it takes all of that.
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. And so let's see. You said over the years, I've learned that the key to effective parenting is the demonstration of unconditional love. It's not about what your children call you or give you in return, but rather about what you give and how you can be an additional blessing to their lives. That's awesome. That unconditional love. You want to talk a little bit about how much unconditional love do you have to have for that large of a family, right?
Oh my Lord. So the unconditional love lesson, um, it's funny because what I realized and what I've realized over the past couple years is that that lesson was for me. So it wasn't so
Mm,
much about the children and what they were
yeah.
doing or what they were doing. You know, it really was God perfecting me and teaching
Mm,
me how to love in spite of.
yeah.
That was not an area that I was strong in, if I'm being completely honest.
Mm,
I had a lot of disappointments in life, and so I had expectations of people, and would easily be disappointed when those expectations did not come to fruition.
yeah.
So the thing about that unconditional love piece is that God gave me the opportunity to really learn that and really embrace that through bringing children into my life. I had to
Mm,
understand what it meant to love unconditionally through the nasty attitudes, through
yeah.
the disappointments, through the mistakes, you know, through the challenges. And that's a lesson that was best learned through loving on my children. And then,
Nice.
you know, that carries on to loving on my husband, and then loving
Hmm.
on strangers. And so like the
Yeah.
lessons, they never end, but they were really important to me through the teaching and demonstration of loving on my children.
Nice. Wow, that's
Yeah.
powerful. Powerful. So you gave some steps of mommying to supplement our toolboxes here. And so we're not going to talk about all of them, but we'll share. They have to get the book and they want all of the steps, but we'll talk about the
Yes.
first two. And so the first one was you did step 4-step mommy, and so as an acronym step. So the S is for servant leadership. So talk a little bit about the servant leadership part.
Servant leadership is combining the concept of I am the boss with but watch me and let me show you how to.
Mm,
So
yeah,
I think one thing about our children in this generation that we're raising up now is that do as I say and not as I do, or do as you're told
yeah,
mentality, that's dead with these kids.
you're
You
right about
have
that.
to lead by example. You know what I
Mm,
mean? You have to lead by
yes,
example, and you have to lead through service, through serving them. Love covers all and
yeah.
covers a multitude of wrongdoing. And so
Hmm.
that's what that servant leadership is all about. Not I'm the boss of you, you do what I said
Yeah.
because I said so, although there is a certain element and a time and a place for that. But it also is about serving my
Yeah.
children and loving them and leading them by example.
Nice. So the T was for transparency. So talk about transparency.
I think everyone needs transparency, even outside of the context of relationships with our children, right? But
Hmm.
specifically to the children, it's a teaching mechanism. Um, Children, adults, everybody learns through vulnerability and through
Yeah.
transparency, and it also builds trust, right? When I'm transparent with my children and I can say, "Hey, I made a mistake." You know, I don't
Right.
have it all together. Work with me, because I think a lot of times as parents there's this unrealistic expectation of, to be a parent, you have to have it all together. And that's
Right.
not so. We don't have it all together. We're
We
figuring
sure
it out
don't.
as we go along.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a certain level of transparency that has to be demonstrated in these relationships with our children, so that they have that example in
Yeah.
their lives. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's huge when you can say, I was wrong. Maybe, I didn't handle that the best way, and have that conversation. Because people are like, you don't have to apologize to your children. They're your children. Oh, yeah, you do.
Yes, you do. Especially if
Sometimes
you
you
want your
do.
children to be the type of person who can apologize to others.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's huge. And so this next part, this is where we're gonna wind it down. But you said
Uh-oh.
if you probably know what I'm about to read. You said if you'd asked me how I imagine my relationships with my stepchildren, wait, if you'd asked me how I imagine my relationships with my stepchildren would have turned out back then, I would have probably laughed in your face. But to my surprise, and through God's grace, we have truly developed something beautiful that I'll cherish until the day I die. I've also learned to love my stepchildren's biological parents as well, and I pray for them often. I am forever grateful to them for blessing me through their children. Now that right there, that's a whole different level of maturity. Talk about, look, we have to bless some people tonight. Talk about how did you get to the point that you are praying for them, the biological parents, and how did you get there?
Well,
Because that's
through the
huge.
through the children,
Yeah.
because it's really, and I'm not going to sit here and present myself as a perfect 10 in this category, because
Mhm.
it is a challenge. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it is. But the thing that I focused on that helped me to get to that place was the kids. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, they didn't ask to be here. They didn't know that their parents were going to separate and get with new
Right.
parents and have new relationships. And when I was able to humble myself to understand that it's not about me, it's about these
Yeah.
kids that I have been called to and that have been placed in my life, who have someone else in their lives that they love just as much, if not more, than me. And that
Hmm.
means that I have to, if I care for that child, I also have to care for their parent. And it's not always a peaches and cream situation. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm on speaking terms, or we hang
Hmm.
out with,
Yeah.
the moms of the children, but I do pray for them. And I
That's
pray for
awesome.
them because I love them, because their children love them. And I am appreciative
Mm.
to them, because if they had not had them, I wouldn't have the
Yeah.
opportunity to have them in my life. So it's just, it requires a mind shift, because sometimes
Yeah.
we just can't get out of our own way. We can't get out of our own feelings to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to, and still am challenging myself to do. So
Yeah.
that's
Because
how
that's probably a daily decision, just like
it is.
forgiveness. It's a daily decision. And so kudos to you for that. Because like I said, that's a whole different level of maturity. It really is. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Call it what it is. What is it that you want readers to take away from your chapter?
um I think I'd say the number one takeaway is that with God all things are possible. um like I said, I never would have imagined, first of all, didn't share much about this in the book, but I
Mm-hmm.
was told that I wouldn't even have children. So
Wow.
for me to have my biological son,
Yeah.
and then to, on top of that, get additional blessings by way of um, my stepchildren, really
Mm.
solidified God's love and grace towards me. And if anything, if you don't take away anything out of this chapter, if you don't take away anything from the steps, anything, any laughs from the experiences, which you should, but
Yeah.
if you don't take away anything, just take away that all things are possible with God.
Amen.
And if he called you to it, then he will get you through it. I will march with that motto until the day I die. And yeah, that's what I say. God causes all things to work
Yeah.
together for the good of those who believe and are called according to his purpose,
His purpose.
even blended families, even blended
Yeah.
families. And you
Amen.
wouldn't expect that because, a blended family is a couple different elements that might be shunned upon,
Hmm.
like divorce and
Yeah.
premature birth and
Hmm. Hmm.
premature in the sense of being
Premarital.
premarital, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but even in that, God can cause all
Yeah.
things to work together for the good, and my family
Absolutely.
is a demonstration of that.
Amen. That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. So tell people where they can purchase a copy of the book from you. People are here who are supporting you in this project. Where can they purchase from you?
Well, you could send me a message on Facebook Messenger, and I will respond with a link directly to my PayPal site where you can purchase the book.
Yeah.
Or if you have my contact information, text or email, you can reach out in that way. But I'd say for the quickest response and to go ahead and get your copy before they are sold out, I would send a message to my Facebook Messenger and I will reply to you with the link.
Awesome, awesome. And so, for those out there who are thinking about, because you said this is not even something that you would have like raised your hand for. So, those people out there who are thinking about sharing their story, either in an anthology like this or in their own book, what advice would you give to that aspiring writer?
Be obedient because it's not about you. But
That's
what
huge.
will happen is that you will be blessed tremendously for your sacrifice, for your
Yeah.
vulnerability, and God will reward you for that obedience. Like you mentioned early on in our interview session, when we go through stuff, it's not always just for us. It's
Yes.
never just for us. It's always
Nope.
for somebody else. So
Yeah.
embrace vulnerability, share, and bless somebody else. You never know how your story can bless someone else who might be going through similar challenges or situations as you.
That's huge. Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much. I know you are a woman on the go, so I thank you for taking the time out for this interview on this evening. It has been a blessing. I'm sure that there's somebody out there who needs to know how you're doing all this, and this is going to be such a blessing to those who read it. So thank you for your yes, for being in the project. Thank you for showing up here tonight. And it's just been a pleasure having you on. To our viewing audience, thank you for tuning into another segment of the LPE Author Chat series for The Mom in Me 2, Volume 2. And stay tuned as our launch is coming up on June the 5th. And so be sure to join us for that as well. And if you are thinking about writing that book, be sure to head on over to www.laboopublishing.com and connect with us there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Take care and have a blessed evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.